my name is Sunny Kim. I am the program manager for UC Santa Barbara's Professional and Continuing Education Department. Specifically, I run the ABA program. And today we are so lucky to have the amazing Ken be our guest speaker at our quarterly webinar. So Ken, I'm not going to steal the spotlight. I'm going to hand it over to you. If you can share with our students, parents, community members, anyone, who's interested in attending this webinar, a little bit about yourself, that would be amazing.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. And before I begin, I want to thank Dr. Sunny Kim for inviting me for this really important topic. It really means a lot to me. We met at Long Beach at the Autism Partnership Foundation conference, where I spoke about my experience growing up as an autistic person and having some insight, particularly about collaboration, and particularly talking about how BCBAs can do, how we can improve and also build upon the skills that we have learned not only through school, but through our supervision, but also with our face-to-face contact with the parents and with the clients, and really getting down to the compassionate root of what it is that we do, which is helping people help themselves. So I want to thank again, Dr. Sunny Kim for allowing me to be here. Speak a little bit about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles. I resided in the South Bay here in California, in Southern California, and my experience growing up was very interesting, and I feel very fortunate, and I'll get to the reason as to why. But do you want to kind of get into kind of just my experience as an autistic person? And is that what you want to get?
Just kind of, if you can share.
Yeah.
I know you're going to share about your amazing accomplishments, but if you want to start with kind of your, upbringings, I know you said you were diagnosed at the age of 2, and how some of the therapy you've received was very instrumental in helping shape who you are today. So I'm sure our audience would love to hear more about that.
So yes, that's great. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about with the diagnosis and the things, talk about my diagnosis, my struggle with that, and where it's led me. So I will do that. So when I was born in 1987, and when I was about a little bit before 2 years old, my parents saw things that were not quite right. They saw, to their confusion, a lot of stimming, a lot of avoidance of eye contact. When I would try to communicate with others, was not clear, nor did it make any sense. I also had the struggle of not wanting to be around others. Sometimes I would want to be around others, and other times my parents would find me on the side of our house in Redondo Beach, just throwing rocks on the side, gathering all the rocks, throwing the rocks on the side of the house, putting things in an order that made sense to me. And if there was any type of disruption of this, they would observe me really upset, crying for hours on end. And at times, they would see my struggle in wanting to be able to communicate something like that. So my parents were wondering what was going on. And so in 1989, 2 years after I was born, I went to UCLA to get a more thorough understanding, because my pediatrician was not able to actually diagnose what was going on. And through UCLA, I've received a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And this is around the time in which the movie Rain Man came out, starring Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. And this really brought to light what autism was to the public. And so for my parents, they started asking questions such as, if this is what they're seeing in the movies, like, am I going to be able to Am I going to have somebody with me for the rest of my life? Am I going to be, in the movie, Dustin Hoffman is originally an institution. Am I going to be institutionalized? Am I going to have relationships with, am I going to go to school? Am I going to have relationships with people? Am I going to get married? Am I going to, there were just so many questions that they had. So with these questions, they became proactive. They sought out people to see what can be done to, first of all, look at what was the biggest issue, which was my communication. I wanted to communicate, but I wasn't able to. So my family, found an excellent speech pathologist who is located in El Segundo. Her name is Dr. Linda Peterson. I thank her for the significant uh, the significant achievement that she had for me, that she was able to do for me, which was one, to help me to meet where I'm at, to help me with understanding how to communicate what I want. By taking the time looking to understand what it is that I liked, and some of the things, especially what my parents saw, was my perseveration, like my focus so much on Star Wars, or my focus on rocks, my focus on lining things up. So she used the things that I really liked from talking with my parents, and used this as a way to get me motivated to communicate. And as I'm going to get into the parent training, there were several things that she was able to really be ahead of the game with. What she met me where I was at with my speech and language. She listened to my parents. She found my interests, and there was clear communication to my parents of what to do at home so that I can be successful, not only in the therapy sessions that I was in, but also at home in the community. So right away, she was working on generalizing my skills by keeping my parents extremely involved with speech and therapy. And I would say that I don't believe without that starting at the age of 3, I would not be where I'm at right now. So one of the things that was really helpful for me was in the speech. Also, actually, before I get into that, Dr. Linda Peterson, this was a time in which ABA was not necessarily as known or as big as it is today, but she was ahead of the game in regards to using the basic principles of behavior within her sessions. Reinforcement, you know, working on how to keep me motivated, how to contrive motivation, how to um, have buy-in from my parents, and especially was they wanted me to be able to communicate. So through her, throughout 3 or 4 years of that type of therapy, I was able to read for the first time a book by Eric Carle called Brown Bear, Brown Bear. I still have it on a tape recorder of me saying it word for word and that was such a huge accomplishment, but it took a lot of effort, and it took a lot of uh, determination on my part and my parents' part to see that. And for me, what was extremely helpful was how involved my parents were in modeling for me what it was to do to get what it is that I wanted, which was to interact, which was to kind of get the things that I want. And also, the time my sister was born, and I wanted to play with her, but in my mind, I was speaking very clearly. But for her, she thought I was from another planet. So there was this lack of understanding, which led me to be more isolated, which led me to be more uh, going back into my back into a routine of being by myself. But with speech and with my parents modeling and being patient with me, it was so helpful that I was able to overcome at least the barrier of communication. Now, with
Interrupt, Ken, but
yes,
what was the frequency of your speech sessions?
I went, it would believe it was between 2 to 3 sessions a week, about 30 minutes to an hour long, but
Okay.
with lots of homework for
Got
my
it.
parents. And then once my goals were met, then that was reduced to 1 time per week. So I was eventually able to graduate from that program once I was going into public school.
Perfect.
So then once going into public school, I still received speech therapy, but and I was able to communicate enough to be able to receive understanding of what was being told to me, and to also reciprocate the things that were required of me. But one of the challenges, and even to this day, that with people who are autistic is understanding social cues. And then social cues, what does that entail? It entails, things such as, nonverbal language. If somebody is crossing their arms or not looking at me or look upset, it was hard for me to discriminate between, like, I can talk to this person rather than this person might not seem like he or she wants to talk, or speaking about a topic again and again and again, and not deviating to other topics, or not being interested in what other kids at the time were doing. It's even sometimes going off and doing my own thing. So my parents saw that where the speech therapy couldn't help me. My parents saw from the report to the teachers and the understanding that I was not meeting social cues. They got involved themselves in regards to my dad helping me with being involved in sports, and also with my mom helping me with kind of talking about, what are some of the, she would ask, like, how's your day going? And then she would give suggestions. And I was always open to it with those suggestions that she would give me, such as, if you're playing basketball, I can't just walk up and kick the ball and try to make a basket. She would ask me, so what do you think would be best? Would it be best to ask if you should play, um, ask somebody if you can take a turn, or if you don't want to play basketball, there's something else that you can play. And I received this type of help from my teachers as well. And I would say, with trial and error and a lot of humiliating situations, but not wanting to give up, I was able to overcome a lot of these stigmas that I had within myself, and kind of the stigmas that take place uh, with people who are autistic, and their ability to fully understand social cues. This led me through getting help from what was in Torrance. I was with the Torrance Unified School District, getting help from what's called special resource, which I gained support with, uh, for help with speech, help with uh, taking tests, help with homework, because cognitively uh, it was very hard for me to understand a lot of concepts with math, a lot of concepts with English, with science. And because of this, I was, as much as I had gained an ability to move forward in my communication, I still had struggles with school. And with this, I kind of was able to get help from the school district, but I was still not meeting kind of the goals where I I wanted, or what my parents wanted. They wanted me to be happy. For me, I wanted to fit in. And it wasn't until high school when I had a teacher. His name was Bobby Joe Thompson, who I love her. She's fantastic. She's up in college 30s. Now she was encouraging me, like, hey, what do you think about college? I never thought of that, because I was just kind of coasting along with, going to school, participating in sports, struggling to gain friends. At that time, I'd made a lot of friends, so I wasn't by myself or anything. But it was hard for me to maintain uh, long-term relationships because of the social cue components. And so I'm like, all right, I'll try it out college. So I went to El Camino. I went to, and with really focusing on which is a community college in Los Angeles. I went to El Camino. And from there, I was able to transfer to UCLA. So and I got my bachelor's degree in history, and with a lot of hard work and with a lot of support, I was able to uh, graduate with a decent GPA. And from there, I didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do until after when I was working at the time, thanks through the work program that I had at my high school at Barnes and Noble. A friend of mine came in, and who I hadn't seen since elementary school. So I asked him, "Hey, what is it that you are doing?" He's like, "Oh, I work with children who are autistic. It's a great job. Pays well. It's really fun." I said, "Huh? I never thought of ever doing that." And it's like, I'll give it a shot. And so that was in May of 2012, and I put in my application to my first ABA company, and I've been in the field of ABA for the last 11 years. 11 years.
And I think you forgot, you then also went back to grad school to get your master's.
Yeah, I was also gonna mention that too. So for 5 years, oh no, I'm sorry. So for a few years, I was kind of seeing what it was. Actually, not 5 years, few months. I was kind of seeing what is this all about? Working uh, with children who had severe disabilities, children who not were very far removed uh, from their classmates and far removed to kind of the expectations. But when our ABA company would come in, and I was able to see the progress that was being made through ABA, I was so inspired. I never because my UCLA, the schooling was so hard. I was like, at that time I had never thought I would want to go back. But now with what I was seeing lives change truly in front of my eyes, I was like, I have to go back. So I went back to school and I got my master's at Cal State Los Angeles under the direction of Dr. Michelle Wallace, Dr. Randy Campbell, and several other professors, where I received my degree from there, counseling, option, and applied behavior analysis. And I've been a BCBA for uh, about 2 years now. And my career from the start of ABA is I've worked for the last 6 years with children, and now for the last 5 years I work as a behavioral consultant for a company called SCB Counseling, which we provide consultation services for companies that house adults who are special needs, living in different types of housing situations, which I can talk about uh, later on in this talk. And most importantly, I am married with 2 children. I have a 5-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter, and they just lighten up my day all the time.
That's fantastic. And how long have you, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been married, or how did you meet your wife, your significant other? Because you talked about, how relationship, like getting into long-term relationships, challenge for you. So how did you overcome that barrier? And now you're happily married with 2 children.
Thank you for asking that question. It's an important one to me. It's after high school, I had a lot of freedom to be able to have communication with whoever I wanted. And why do I say it like that? Growing up with the same peers and different types of students, a lot of them saw me go to uh, special needs classes, and also that was and by seeing this was used against me. So I was bullied, and some in many instances. And so they were always grew up with me, and I always had that mindset that they knew who I was because of my diagnosis. Later, I found out that wasn't the case, but I always had the stigma of these people know who, like, I'm autistic, and kind of things like that. But after I graduated from high school, this is when I really developed and fully grew in the sense of being okay with who I was and being able to communicate and to build relationships. And particularly with regards to my wife, I met her through my really dear friend in college at UCLA, who they would they actually were in a band together. And for me, I love music. I really connect with music. So at the time, she was singing in my friend's band, and at a year or two later, um, I met her formally at my friend's birthday party. And I was very nervous because of, getting, this was the first time I'd had a real uh, love for somebody. And the first time I really wanted to uh, make this a long lasting thing, a long lasting relationship. And so I was very fortunate because she was very understanding and wanted to know more. And she really gave me the assurance that, hey, some of these struggles that you have, many people have, whether neurotypical or not. And it was something about that that really gave me a lot of peace and a lot of confidence. And so, I met her in 2013, and we have been married for the last uh, 7 years. So she understands, some of my struggles that I still have, which is, uh, remembering things, step, sticking to a routine, or being able to communicate how I feel, being able to understand that there are some days where, because of there's different types of social interaction settings where in a day I might be really tired, so I might need my space. She was very understanding and really compassionate with me about that, and we've been able to make it work. And yeah, we've been together for about 10 years. About 10 years.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And so as you've now, I mean, you've talked a little bit about your background. So you did receive special education services, going to the schools in California. And then you graduated UCLA, you graduated and then you went to Cal State LA, got your master's, and here you are as a professional. I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of the importance of parent education, because it seems like compared to when you first started this journey, I don't think there was a whole lot out there back in the late 80s, or even the 90s, in terms of like, how do we best support autistic individuals compared to what we've learned from the science today. I know one of the critical elements you've kind of alluded to was like the importance of parent education and parent participation. And, I think that's still very, very important. So I wanted to shift gears and talk about, like the involvement of parents, like what is your suggestion, like feedback, how important is that, as well as any insight you can give.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as I was saying in the beginning, kind of talking about my parents' involvement, um, which was fundamental in my development. Their ability to see where the realistic challenges that I had to meet me where I was at and build upon that was significant. I don't believe that I would be where I'm at if it wasn't for my parents' involvement in my life. Not only that, but also with I was very fortunate with my extended family who were really supportive and wanted to, uh, I didn't, at no point did I ever feel like I was, I didn't even realize or know what the word autism was until later in high school. I'm sorry, not high school, elementary school. I would go to these classes. I never thought of it because I felt so I felt like I fit in very well. Um, but going kind of to parent training. So let me jump ahead. Let me jump ahead with this. So when I started to work at my uh, behavioral therapy company, the first one when I was working with the kids, there was a lot of interactions, tabletop activities, different type of environments that I was at, where it was either at school or in the house or out in the community. But one of the things that I had noticed is how I was able to connect with with parents was really one having it having having a special having a diagnosis myself and knowing like how hard it was for my parents and you know to help me feel uh connected and to work on help and getting me to connect with them. So I spent a lot of time talking with parents, seeing like, how are you doing? How are you uh what are you going through right now? Like what are your biggest um your biggest issues that you have? And so I was able to build right away really strong communication with the family. One of the things too that I noticed that I think this is so this is from 2012. So from 1980 to 2012, there was a ton of information and a ton of scientific um, research that was done that was being implemented. So in the early 2010s, there was uh, there was so much knowledge. Even now, there's even more knowledge of what ABA is. And so with that knowledge, I was learning how to really connect with the children that I was working with, and parents were able to see that just because of one of the things that saw was uh, they would be calm. The children would be calm. They would be able to focus. They would be able to listen. I met them where they were at. But one of the things that I look back at, and this is why I focus a lot on my parent training, is that I wish I did more. And in my sessions, I would talk a lot with the parents, but I didn't do enough to show what it is that I was doing, be able to teach the parents like verbatim, like how to run certain intervention or behavioral skills, or how like if I were to leave, like what the parents could do to continue the work that we did. And there was a lot of factors too. There's one is one parent is either at home more than the other. The second is, from the clients that I had, is both parents worked, and there was a caretaker. So, and also some of the things were some of the kids were just at school. So there were some factors that were in place that I understood, but there was other times where I wish I would have done more to have sessions with the parents and getting them more involved. And when I began working with adults, I really made sure whoever was the caretaker or whoever was uh, whether the parents or whether being involved in meetings discussed like the progress of the individual, that I would really sit with them and go over these trainings with them, because I truly believe, and this is that in our um, in our field, and with anything, we can always do more. I think essentially with parent training, there's so much more that we can do as BCBAs. And what are some of those things? I think as I was saying before, the with talking with parents, especially with those who were newly involved with ABA, understanding the level of stress that the parents were going through and are going through. They're dealing with disruptive behaviors, these expectations of long-term care, the severity of the impairments that their children have difficulties with relating to their child. Um, and also from my communication, even to this day, is what parents struggle with and what gets them stressed is like, this understanding from friends and family of what it means to be autistic or what it means to be of any other diagnosis, even besides autism. The level of overwhelming care and the demands that will be placed on the parents, especially with professionals coming in and out of the house, the parents having to uh, deal with a whole new lifestyle. And then and because of that, and I knowing like what my parents went through, I really made an effort to relate to them because I myself I had seen it what my parents had gone through, even at a young age. And even through high school, seeing the different things that I struggled with and letting them know that, I totally understand where you're coming from and giving them a little insight of my own life. Because also there's the need to make sense of what is going on with about their child's diagnosis and the interventions that are going to take place. The monetary component, the unexpected like reset of the parents' vision for their child before they really understood what is their confirmed diagnosis. That especially is really important. And also like understanding, these professionals are going to come into the home and telling them, what needs to be done for their child. They're not going to be used to having somebody tell them what to do because they've had this not expectation, but a vision of like what they want for the child before they understood what it was that that was preventing them from meeting certain milestones and certain goals and things like that. So I think with parent training, that's the first thing that will lead to a successful collaboration is the understanding the level of stress that the parents are going through. Whether it's both parents are involved, whether it's just a single mom or dad, whether it's whatever is the caretaker, or it's the grandma that or the grandparents or an aunt that's taking care of that is knowing where they're at, really kind of understanding, getting to a compassionate level. Because what's going to happen? What happens to motivation under stress? And what I mean by that, like the motivation of looking at, hey, we have the tools and the research and the science and the application of it, like actually working on it in person, to be able to help your child, be part of not only their environment, but of the environment of the family that is in that person's life. But it's hard to with being under stress with all these other components that I talked about before. It'll decrease motivation. It can interfere with collaboration, and it interferes with the intervention progress. And that will happen. The decreased motivation, the interference, if is it, that will happen if we don't understand the level of stress, that parents can be under, uh, especially when doing something completely uh, life really life changing and life altering.
Do you have
So
suggestions for how you might, I mean, I think you bring up a very important point in terms of like stress. I mean, it's so well documented in the literature. There's so many statistics about, parents who have an autistic child, like their level of stress is so, compared to like other disabilities, it's a lot higher. Do you like what would be some suggestions for parents to, handle that stress, or like what's feedback you've provided parents you've worked with?
I would say on my end, in the regards to for I think it's important, especially for behaviorists, to let parents know we are in this together. You know, that's extremely important because as you want, as parents, you want success for your child. We also want success for your child. And what's really key is we want to know what it's like. We want to know about your experience, what you're going through, so that we can meet you in the middle and having the knowledge and the skills of applied behavior analysis to help you where you're at. And that's the thing is knowing that for those who will be working with your child is that we want to, good ABA, BCBAs, and therapists want to meet you where you're at. Like, what is your current knowledge and your skills of how, what it is that you are currently working on with your child. And I think what's most important for parents, I think, is just to be as honest as possible when talking with behavioralists or with the BTBA, because we want to listen. We really want to know what you're going through. What are your struggles? What is it that your biggest concerns, so that we can set the kind of the groundwork for appropriate goals for you. And also, we will ask questions and help you understand, like, the basic components of behavior. What is behavior? And I think with parents, I would say, especially, like, it's okay to not feel okay, especially in the beginning. It's okay not to feel okay. We get it. It's challenging. It's a real challenge to go through something that's very unexpected and unknown. But what I would say, to also be aware that it's this to know that it's going to be a long-term journey, but what you put into it is what's going to make that journey beautiful um, or very hard. So I would, yeah. So to kind of sum up, I would say it's okay to not feel okay. And also to know that these ABA therapists who are coming to help you, like, we are going to meet you where you're at, and we want to help you, and we want to listen. And that will happen through some of the interviews, being with you uh, when you are at home or you're out in the community. And we want to set the groundwork to have realistic and successful goals.
I think to go off of that, I know we have some listeners here who are aspiring to become BCBAs. We have parents, we have we have actual BCBAs, but from our previous webinar where, a parent kind of talked about her experience, I do want to, and Ken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but finding the right people, right? I think that's also because
Yeah.
you're a parent and you work with a BCBA and you're like, this BCBA is not listening to me and never asks me what I want to work on with my child. It's like saying, this is what we're going to work on. I would say run from that person, fire that person, and find a new person.
Oh, I have no need to correct you, because everything you said is correct. Look, this is your child, and this is you're invested in your child. And so if there's things that you see that, you know, in regards to the therapist that's working with your child, where you feel like there's no connection, there's a misunderstanding of the child with the therapist, it is absolutely fine to say, hey, you know what, this is not working. I don't want to work with this. I don't want this therapist working with my child, because what the work that is put in is going to have long-term uh, consequences, and so it's important to catch it early, especially if you see something where you don't. And that's why communication with the BCBA is extremely important. So always have that line of communication available when you see things that are positive and when you see things that are negative. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, and for me, I'm when I see, like, therapists not doing their part, I'm very quick to voice my concerns. Quicker the better for people with that.
Interrupted you. So you see, the first thing is, for parent training is understanding parents' level of stress and kind of meeting them where they're at. What are some other important factors for when we provide parent education or parent training?
I think, being when in parent training, especially initially when you're beginning kind of the parent training, is being prepared for I I would say, especially in the beginning, and what will be helpful for BCBAs too, is, like, ask questions that um and think about goals that have meaning and so that are socially valid for you and your child, because everybody is different. And so really when you're working on goals is really working on like, you know, where your child is at. Because for me, for my parents, it was communication. Some people are different. And so I think what's important is when parents are working with the BCBAs is thinking about the big picture and what are those small steps that are going to lead to the big picture. What do I mean by that? It's like where do you see, you know, where do you see your child, in a certain time span, and what type of things can lead to that particular goal. And it has to be realistic, and it also has to be things that you observe, in the regards to their skill sets, and in regards to where you can see their skill sets leading, well as like what are some things that it's okay for parents to say like what are some things you would like uh your child to do in the home and in the community and out in the community. I think also too, for parents, just ask a lot of questions, ask a lot of questions. There's no questions that uh I think there's like no questions that shouldn't be asked. And also too, if there are things that are you have a misunderstanding, I'd say ask away. Like, I don't really get what reinforcement is, or I don't understand why we're working on manding. I don't understand what is the significance. So you can have that conversation, so that way there's a lot of clarity and a lot of clear communication about what it is that you want, what's best for your child.
Great. And then I know earlier you had mentioned like kind of when you were growing up, your parents put you in sports, you really like music. I would say part of parent education is also encouraging parents to enroll their child in different, extracurricular activities. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how important is that? Should they focus just on like, the autistic symptoms, or should they try to include their children in many extracurricular activities as possible? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think before doing like looking at what to enroll is seeing like does your child want to be socially active? Does your child want to be um kind of to themselves? Does your child like is kind of looking to gauge is the uh where is the line of where you think that your child should be. But with that is to keep in mind that what children see is oftentimes what they will model. So for my parents, they wanted to model for me, you know, interaction. Being around people is good. Having that line of uh, communication with my parents. Being especially involved in sensory um, activities. It was really important for me because it helped me to focus when I really, and that's one of the biggest things that helped me, was it helped me to stay focused. For your child, is it sports? For your child, it could be art. For your child, um, it could be clubs. For your child, it could be many things. And there's such a wide spectrum. But I think the more that we can have that type of interaction, or those type of sports, or those type of social things, that you can kind of start looking to see where they could be more involved in, that they actually would like. The sooner you can, the better.
And then the last thing kind of wanted to touch upon before we open it up to Q&A is, you know, after, graduating or, completing high school, kind of what's next, because so much of research has been focused on early intervention. But, for some kids who didn't get the opportunity for early intervention, were for kids that are more severe on the spectrum, that also have an intellectual disability, because it's 1 in 6, according to CDC. Like, how do we best support those individuals? And I think with your expertise in consulting with the, residential facilities, I think it would be great for you to kind of talk about that piece. How can
Absolutely.
for that? Like, what's passed? Like, what's the guidance? Do you believe ABA is still valid for the adult population?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, ABA is not just autism. ABA is for everybody. Whether a person has a diagnosis of autism, whether they have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, whether they have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, whether it's neurotypical, ABA is for everybody because it helps individuals. ABA helps understand why the environment, what's going on in the environment that's causing a person to act a certain way. And so right now, the last 5 years, I've been working with adults, and there's been a lot of things that I have noticed that for parents, I would like for you to be aware of, and also this is when I talk about the big picture, it's going to relate into a lot of what I'm about to say. Um, there is a lot of research, and there is a lot of uh, and very rightfully so, there's a lot of research and there is a lot of information about ABA and how ABA helps children. There is not enough for adults. That's one of the things I didn't realize until I started working with adults. The level of support that is in regards to hours, there's quite a bit of hours for children, but once they become adults, that number decreases pretty significantly. There is, I'm trying on my part to advocate for more of what I see as a lack in my field, which is this is the things that I believe should be happening with people who are on the spectrum who become adults is there needs to be there's a real lack of RBTs that work with adults after they turn I don't know if it's 22 or 23. There is a there's a lack of RBTs. There's a decrease in BCBA supervision. There is because a lot of times from what I've seen, the funding is just not there. So with these situations, it's important to kind of look at, especially if you have early child intervention, what are once they turn 23, like what are some of those things that you want to make sure that your child is able to do? Being able to be safe in the community, being able to wash their hands, being able to focus on their hygiene, being able to focus on money management, which is a big thing. And one of the things I want to bring to attention is so there in California, there are different type of housing situations that are set up for those who are special needs that they could possibly could live in, which is intermediate care facilities, parent and family members' homes, independent living skills type of homes, which is the thing that I work in. Sorry, not independent living, but supportive living services, family home agencies, and self-determination programs. So the last 3 years, I've worked with intermediate care facilities, supportive living services, and family home agencies. So independent care facilities is like adult residential facilities. So it'll house up to maybe 4, sometimes 6 adults within a home. And those are the more behaviorally more with more I don't want to say restrictive, but there's more attention to the behavioral some of the behavioral issues and some of the medical issues. Supportive living is those who are for the supportive living services that I work with. So that's a really unique situation because supportive living services, how that's set up is there are so with the supported living services, what it essentially is it's a support home where there is a home there is a home within a typical neighborhood where the individual will pay the rent, they will pay uh, their room and board, but they live essentially on their own. There is a staff that will be with them to kind of provide support, anything that the individual will need. And my role is to help work on kind of goals for them and work on goals for the staff. But what is the dilemma that I have is that the hours are not enough. So there's a what I'm really working on right now is advocating for uh, more support and more attention to adults, because no matter what, even with me, there's still things within my capability and that kind of, and with because of my spectrum, I still struggle with, with social cues, with management. I thank God for my wife who always keeps me in check, but many adults don't have that. And so it's important for parents to know, like, do you want your where do you want your child to be? Where do you want them living? What do you want them to do in order to uh, be as independent as possible? And that's a topic I could probably talk for a lot about, and I can definitely ask questions, or I can answer any questions that parents may have. It's good to know, just like, I'll sum it up. It's like, there's not enough right now in California, there is not enough attention for adults with special needs. There are things that are out there. I help and I supervise day programs. I help supervise, like I said, supportive living homes, residential area homes, and it's really important for parents to look at one, how, as we were speaking about, like, with not meshing with staff, or staff not meshing with your child. It's really key to, when visiting these homes, to like be aware of that as well. If there are things that that your child uh, could either get better at or know that they can do, but that availability or access is not there, is to speak up and let them know. And I think what's really helpful for parents is if there's more attention that's brought to the reduction of hours, behavioral hours um, for adults who are special needs, for there to be more, if not the same, if way more than what it is now. And the only way to do that is, one, being aware of it and try to see who to communicate uh, with about that. Regional center, I don't know about regional center, but I do think it'd be good to. And this is kind of where I'm at right now. It's looking at, like, what can be done to help provide more support hours to um, support hours, and having meaningful support hours to uh, our children who are becoming adults. What does that look like for them? And having kind of like goals set for them of, like, how to be as independent as adults in the situations that they're at. Whether, again, it's either at the parent's home, at a supportive living, or residential, and being extremely involved with them there, visiting them, talking with the behaviorists, looking at staff, seeing what they do, because there's just a big need for that.
Um, I think we're almost there to open it up for questions. I know I'm already getting questions. My very last thing I wanted to ask you, Ken, and maybe you might be biased, I'm biased because we're both BCBAs. But I know in the last few years, there's been a lot of criticism about our field of ABA. what are your thoughts on that? I think, when I teach my students, when I have my courses, I try to, bring awareness that ABA is a science and there's lots of different methods of how ABA gets implemented. But as a person who has autism, but also practices, the science of ABA, like, what's your take? I mean, you've talked about it over and over about how effective it is, not just for individuals with autism, but to many people. Do you have any opinion about that?
I, yeah, I do. I think it's really important, especially as there is criticism of ABA, is looking at like where it's coming from. You know, some of the issues are valid. Some of it is a little, I wouldn't agree with that. And one of the things I wouldn't agree was that it would be is that ABA should be banned or ABA is a, uh, these are not my words. It's what I've heard. It's mind control or it's torture. That's not true. That's not what ABA is. ABA, as you said, is a science. It's acted upon research from people interacting with people. And with that type of interaction and with that type of in this type of scientific field, there's always going to be progression. And the thing that I'm glad what's happening is looking at more of the compassionate side of the field. And that's not to say that there wasn't there. I certainly, with the people that I work with in my own company, I they amaze me, and I bow low to them because of how much they showed love and compassion and care and saw the human being in that individual uh, before working on these different type of programs. What is true is that from what I've seen is that it can get rigid. It can get rigid, and that's why it's important, especially as this is being talked about now. Some of these criticism is kind of is checking yourself when you're getting into a rigid a routine, meaning like, okay, I'm going to do discrete trial training. How many trials? 10. How long am I going to be at the table? I don't want to be there for that long. I want them to be able to do some tabletop and then working on the natural, working in the natural environment on different programs. That international environment could be their kitchen, their interaction with their parents, which is what this goes into with the parent training, is like being more involved. Parents being trying to incorporate the parent involvement as much as possible. Um, and I think we're getting there. And I think it's important to know that, like, yes, there are in anything there are critiques, but it shouldn't uh, be a uh, it shouldn't give support or a reinforcement that ABA shouldn't be used because I mean I look at how it was helped with me. I look at what I've done with the kids and the adults, and working with staff who are working with adults and with the parents that I've worked with, um, parents that work that with their children, and with that parent training and truly like understanding where they're coming from and meeting them where they're at, where the issue and the problem I believe related is not meeting where the parents at, and not understanding where they were coming from and not involving them, and also kind of getting into that rigid, um, kind of that rigid format where, based upon like how many learning opportunities we make, we weren't looking at some of the, like what it was, I was, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about my, were the mistakes that I made. And from learning, and as me, as like, I'm aware of that and I learn from that. And also too, like, we make mistakes. And that's why the type of communication with the parent is so important. Is like, how are you doing? Same thing with parents, like asking the staff, hey, how are you doing? You seem kind of tired. And then you can be able to do that kind of stuff by building a relationship with it. Um, yeah, I hope that answers. I just wanted to give kind of an honest view of it. But ABA absolutely is so essential for our kiddos, and I think it's more of the human component that that gets into play
Absolutely.
when with dealing not only with ABA but dealing with.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to questions. We already got a from Melissa. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and we will try to answer all of the questions. So the first question we got is, what advice would you give to parents of young children who have received a diagnosis related to advocating for the child's long-term needs? So, Ken, I think did you get that question?
Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry about that.
What advice would you give to parents of young children who have received a diagnosis related to advocating for the child's long-term needs?
So they're asking, what to do for parents who received a diagnosis, what to do with that.
How do you advocate for their long-term needs?
So for me, my parents were really aware that because there was so much at that time when my parents found out about my diagnosis, there was not a lot of knowledge about what autism was. So they had to do a lot of research, a lot of searching, a lot of there were many unknowns that were out there for them. And it wasn't until they found the doctor that I had where they were and kind of seeing the progress that she had made with me, where they were able to find somebody that clicked with me and somebody who they can trust to be able to, tell them what it is that they need to do with the kind of the homework that they need. And with that, kind of tying into today's environment, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of resources that are out there. And I think with parents who receive a diagnosis is aim for the stars, aim for the best. The best type of treatment that you can get, uh, even if it takes like a, if you're, it's important to search, and it's important to look for the best, what's going to work best for your child. So I think, to shoot for the stars is your best starting point.
I shoot for the stars.
Shoot for the stars.
Every child, don't limit their possibilities, their potential.
Right, and by knowing, and I think that will happen when there's that acceptance of that long journey that young parents that parents of young children will face. It's going to be a long journey, but you know what? There are really the best type of service or support for your child is out there.
Yes. Someone put in the chat like short-term goals. I guess maybe asking about what would be some good short-term goals. I would think it has to be individualized on the child's needs, but I don't know if you.
I think especially with goals that for short-term goals, what's really important is I think a few things is because this could both be short and it could be long. It could be but the four that I've researched is expressive communication, receptive communication, daily living skills, and behavioral management. So behavioral management is like the proactive and the proactive and some of the reactive. I'm sorry, not the proactive and the prevention strategies that can take place. There some short-term goals would just be for me, for short-term goals was one, like the long-term goal is for me to be able to read a book. And the short-term goal for me was to be able to read a word on a page. And then building up that goal. From the short term, I read one word, then I read 2 words, then I read 3 words until I read the entire all of the words and the sentences on that page. That's kind of like I look at it as a short term goal. That was my experience, and each parent's uh, with the children that each parent has, where their struggles at. That's you have to meet them where they're at. And for me, it was that short-term goal was being able to read. The long-term goal was being able to read. The short-term goal was read like one word, and starting from there.
Oh, okay. So, do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I would say we got a question. Is your ideal world, what would ABA behavior hours look like for adults?
That is a great question, and I think for that to be an ideal in an ideal world, for me, it would be having RBTs work with the individual, because that's not happening right now. Having homes where there are registered behavior technicians working with the individual 24/7. So some of that RBT, some of those behavioral hours would be geared towards, like, working on daily living skills, working on um, hygiene skills, all kinds of skills. And right now, the staff are more of kind of there's not staff where there's a RBT training for the staff that work with adults who are living in specialized homes. So ideally, as much as possible, the hours, it would be hard even to, I would say the maximum. I'm trying to shoot for the stars myself, is in advocating for as much as possible. Right now, um, it's not enough. It's not enough. And the type of staff that work with them, there needs to be more available assets to provide more behavioral training for the
We got a question or a statement. I want to open care homes for adults. What is your ideal home? Can I visit it?
I would my ideal home would be one based upon like where the individual is with regards to what type of skill sets they have. So, like, for example, that's a good question. What do I one? It would be uh, an individual would be able to have their own uh, their own room, being able to live in a home where they have their own room, they have access to the kitchen, they have access to the backyard, they have access to uh, they have access to the living room, they have access to the community, and for there to be the same type of RBT training or ABA training as we see with children that are in our homes or in the schools. That continuous type of support that we see in our homes should take place in either like in one of the homes that, like, that I mentioned, either the supportive living or the family home agency, that type of continuous support, and being able to help them with learning different types of motivation and with different types of learning skills to go out into the community, and then also with the RBTs to work with individuals out in the community, even as adults, whether they're in a work program, whether they're in a community community college setting, being there to be support to them. Uh, that would be ideal for me. So that type of continuous support that we see with children from elementary school to high school, um, and that's the ultimate goal for me. For the short term, is for me, I would love to have, and my home would be like having RBTs being able to be trained and working with adults and kind of see how it is in comparison of children and children versus adults. And I'm hoping that to do that someday. Either having my own home or creating more programs that are available for RBTs to learn with working with adults. With terms of visitation, yeah, I can maybe we can talk in private or in person.
Perfect. And maybe you guys can collaborate and open a home together.
Maybe that would be great. Hey, I'm looking for ideas. So
We have another question of, do you think BCBAs can also do one-on-one sessions because they have more knowledge instead of RBTs?
Yeah, and in my work and the work that I do, I do a lot of that. I do a lot of the one-to-one sessions, and it depends a lot. So in my working with supportive living services, I work with individuals who are on a diversion program. And what do I mean by that? So it's regional center clients or regional center consumers who have ended up in the prison system because of a crime, or have ended up in jail uh, because of a crime, and they are not competent to stand trial. So with this type of divergent plan, they go into this supportive living service program. Not all SLS, supportive living services, are like that, but the one that I work with specifically, um, I work with them, and these are individuals who are regional center clients. They either have autism, they have schizophrenia, they have bipolar, and the one-on-one support that I do is the following. I work on a lot of discrimination training of and preventative strategies with the individual, and as I was talking before, kind of meeting where the parents are at. I meet the client where they're at because they have either um, been through a lot, being ill, been through a lot, being through, uh, not getting the type of support or services that they needed to receive when they were growing up. So I work with them where they're at, and which is teaching them uh, discrimination training of like one understanding like what causes them to be upset, what causes them to get angry, what causes them to be physically aggressive, understanding kind of also what is the consequence. I work with the individuals uh, um, doing that, and I train the staff individually of how to, one, take data collection, two, understanding ABC data, what is behavior, what are the functions of behavior, what goals we can meet for when they're in the home, how can we get them out into the community. And so I'm always I'm constantly trying to work one to one, even though my role is more support. I have to do, which is kind of giving recommendations. I do a lot of behavioral skills training, a lot of BST training. Talking about
We have a question from a mom. I often wonder what my 4-year-old son, nonverbal yet, thinks and feels about this whole pressure of therapies.
From the question, from saying the pressure of therapy, I'm assuming that either the child is showing displays of uh, external stress, or it's more so like kind of the pressure or like the expectation of having results. And I think for nonverbal,
I think probably the latter, just having a lot of therapy.
yeah, having a lot of therapy, a lot of the and that's that's a lot with where it comes to parent training. With the For me, what was successful and from what I've seen with parent training is having the parents involved as much as possible. As much as possible will relieve a lot of the pressure. At least not in the short term, but in the long term, because when you kind of understand what it is that they're working on, how yourself can help with that will significantly uh, one, knowing that your child is with them in this process, and kind of knowing that you, the parent, are in this together with the child. that that and just speaking from personal experience, is such an ideal component to at least give some reduce some pressure off of that, being part of the process with them or her.
Would you, when you were growing up and receiving different therapies, did you feel like it was too much ever? Did you feel pressure like, oh my gosh, I'm having so much therapy? Or was it more, you didn't think of
No,
it?
no, I would say that the type of therapy that I got is not the same as it is today. In the sense of just the extensiveness of it. That's why parent training and having parents involved in that process is so important, because of the amount of hours that are the amount of hours that are involved, and the hours are so important. I mean, especially with early intervention, these are so essential. So as for parents, if you can be part of that as much as possible.
That's a great question. Do we have any more questions from the audience? I am really, it's a very useful talk. I mean, I guess if you don't have any other questions, what are, if you had to give it like last thoughts, final thoughts, what would they be to this group? I mean, you shared a lot of amazing things today, like finding, parent involvement is super, super important. And I mean, it's very, I mean, it seems like you didn't, when you were younger, you didn't receive that intensive ABA, but yet here you are, you're very articulate, you're able to communicate, you have a master's degree, you're a BCBA. And I think a lot of that is probably accredited to the level of involvement your parents, were, right? Like
Yeah.
how were. So, I think you're like that living proof of, parent involvement is so important and so critical. And kind of what you shared is making sure the parents understand, if you're a parent, making sure you understand what the therapists are doing. And if you're a therapist, making sure that you're able to explain to the parents like exactly what you're doing and ask a lot of questions and meet them where they're at. So I think we need to collaborate with the parents in order for it to be successful for the child. I think you also shared the importance of shoot for the stars. I think that's whether the child is 3, 4, or, if you're working with the adult population, never give up. I think even as adults, we can always improve upon our skills. I'm always learning new things. So, even if we're working with the population that does have cognitive impairments, we shouldn't like limit what they're capable of. You talked about the importance of being compassionate when we're in this field. And then did I miss anything?
No, I mean that's a great summary, and I think like as I talked in and when we met each other in Long Beach and also today is that collaboration and that team effort is what's going to lead uh, to mastering a lot of these goals. That collaboration, being a team, and also being part of that team is like there's a common like there's players that are there to have a common purpose, which is to win, and it's important with the collaboration. Collaboration, you're winning. If you're not collaborating, you're taking an L. So you're taking a loss. So I would say, um, especially with collaboration, is making sure that there's a level of respect and understanding of each other. And if you don't see that, either working on that or at least making that known to uh, and when I say collaboration or like personalities, it's either like the therapist with the child or the parent with the BCBA. Those kind of things are especially important. And that goes into the level of compassion and also really looking at like the long-term goals of like when as it's hard, especially as a with a parent that's newly um, with a 3-year-old or 4-year-old who's newly diagnosed. Kind of think about and especially in the moment, what will they be like when they're 22 or 23? But it's really important to start the process with that. Really start the process with that. I think that will be very motivational as it was for my parents.
Absolutely. One last question. What advice would you give professionals who are trying to understand this amazing field?
What advice would you give to professionals trying to understand this amazing field?
This person is like just starting off in this field.
There is this field is not limited to just children. This field is there's so much opportunity in this field. It's not even with organizations, with how to help with like with sports, how to help with adults, how to help companies. There are so many there's so much room for ABA, and there's a lot of opportunity with ABA to to make a difference in people's lives. So I would say um, wherever you feel and the things, opportunities that you'll find is always like as with me, I always thought I was going to be working with kids, but I took a chance with working with adults as well. As much as I love working with kids, and I do miss working with them, but it was the best decision I ever made. So your growth, like don't be afraid to grow and see where ABA can take you. Because now it's giving me opportunity to see where I can really help and be of benefit for what what benefit works for you. Like whether it's with kids, with adults, you know, the stars.
Say for young professionals too, because I have so many students that tell me horror stories about these ABA organizations. If something doesn't feel right, something doesn't seem right, you're kind of sketched out about a specific policy, run away from that ABA company and find another one that is going to help support your growth as a professional. I think, we don't want to reinforce these big ABA organizations that really are out there for more of the monetary, gain, and not so much about the client well-being or even helping you grow as a professional. I think that's really, really important to not encourage these big ABA companies to stay big. So again, if you're working for an ABA company and you're like, oh, I barely see my BCBA, I see my supervisor once a month, that's not enough. You should be meeting with your supervisor on a weekly basis. Same with parents, right? Parents, if you're only seeing your BCBA like once a month, I would say it's time to find another as easy. I I make it sound like it's a lot easy to find these BCBAs or organizations because the wait list is crazy, but it's better to fire that person or quit that company than to stick around with, an organization or a person that isn't meshing with your core ethical values.
Absolutely. There was something in the chat that I thought was really, uh, really impactful, which was I think parents have endless questions, and there are no correct answers, only positive behavior change that helps them relieve their anxieties. And I think that's such a good point because as for me, I'm sharing my experience, with the experience that I received uh, growing up, and I do believe that from what I've seen and the change that I've seen, there's that the factor of success that I had. I see that I can totally relate to that in the individuals that I see success in. And as this person said, positive behavior change is what helps out. So my parents immediately their positive behavior change was being proactive. And as there are many endless questions and there are no correct answers, that's true. That is life. That is the game. It's like as I was saying before, when we kind of came to the social cues, it's trial and error. It's getting burned by the fire, then getting relieved by the ocean. There is so many the mistakes that I made in as being autistic and being a BCBA, but that does not mean that I continue to not look at the positive behavior change that goes to what to either to have a as meaningful a successful life as I could have. And I'm really grateful for the how my parents were active for what my needs and where I needed to be. And same thing with each parent. Each parent is going to have um, their different struggles. I've never been nonverbal. I don't have to use ACC device. Some parents do. Some individuals they need to be uh, uh, in a skilled living facility. Some individuals will always need services. Some of them may graduate out of that out of being a regional center client. But the most important thing is don't be afraid the of the unknown. I would say be afraid of not going into the unknown and being able to uh, going through the trial and error to be able to have the most successful results, the positive results that you can. And I would really say, especially somebody who's autistic and is in the field of ABA, there is I am so grateful that I stumbled upon this field, and I'm so grateful the change that I've seen through the tools that have been presented through ABA. I would have never gone back to school after UCLA, but I saw what it did. I saw what it did with the clients that I work with because I I met the parents where they were at. I understood, and I think with our field, we're getting a lot better, and we're building upon more of the compassionate component of this type of um, interaction with the this type of interaction with the parents. And I think if we build upon even more so with parent training, oh man, the what is the world? The world is your oyster. I think there's just so much availability and so much access to going beyond with children.
Awesome.
So
That was a great, that was that. I think this is the perfect place to end it. That was so inspirational. Um, for everyone who's attended, I will be sending out an email with, instructions, or if you are seeking out that CEU, BACB CEU, I will send you guys instructions on how to ask for that. Ken, would you be okay with me sharing your contact information in case parents or, any of these professionals want to connect with you? I'll also include Ken's contact information, and this webinar is recorded. So once our team cleans it up and, brands it, we will be sure to send out the recorded webinar. Thank you guys so much for joining. This was the last one for 2023. We will start up with our webinar series for 2024 in February. Thank you guys so much and have a fantastic rest of your day.
thank you so much, Sunny. Have a great rest of your day too.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everybody. Thank you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me and contact me. I would love to be in contact with you.
And I think you said you're traveling to Greece, right?
Yes, next week.
That sounds, are you going with your family?
The kids are young, so I'm going with some friends, but we plan on going back when my daughter gets a little bit older. So that'll be fun. So I'll be gone for the next couple of weeks, but I'm still available via email. So there's still some Wi-Fi over there if you want
I
to reach.
asked because I know we had several participants. I don't know what time it is in Greece, really late, but they're
Oh, nice.
us.
Kalispera. Kalispera. Good evening to you all.
All right. Thank you guys so much and have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.